We know Joe's started. Yes.
Okay, let's get going. Yep. Okay, thank you and welcome everybody to today's meeting of City York Council's Audit and Governance Committee. My name is Councillor Holly. I'll be chairing the committee this evening, and we have slightly depleted rows of councillors down either side, but we are hoping they will join us in due course. So if I could ask if there are any apologies. I think we're expecting the three missing councillors, but we do have apologies from Miles Binney, our independent person. So if we move on then to declarations of interest.
And apologies from Jo Coles for being late because she's got another commitment first.
Yeah. We're expecting her relatively shortly. So no declarations? No. If we move on then to item 3, which is exclusion of press and public. So this is to consider the exclusion of the press and public from the meeting during consideration of annexes 2 to 9 of agenda item 13 on the grounds it contains information relating to the financial or business affairs of any particular person. This information is classed as exempt under paragraph 3 of Schedule 12 to Section 100A of the Local Government Act 1972 as revised, etc., etc. Are we happy then to agree that? Yes, okay, thank you. If we move on then to item 4, which is the minutes and action log, and this is specifically the minutes of the 3rd of September. Are there any issues anybody's noticed with them? Councillor Rose?
Yeah, the apologies are listed in the header for our independent member in the apologies for absence point 16. It doesn't mention those apologies for absence. It's the smallest amendment ever, but it only lists the councillor apology in the apologies section, not both.
Okay, yeah. Was Councillor Myers here last time?
So, sorry, let me
so.
pull up exactly where I'm looking at this. So
I think if we just check that item 16 represents who was actually at the meeting.
So on page 7, you've got the bit at the top. It's got in attendance and apologies. And apologies there includes Mr. Binney. But then underneath you've got part A minute, which is 16 apologies for absence, and that doesn't include him.
Yeah.
He's probably just muscle memory, and I've wrote Myers instead of Mr. Binney. We can just cross it. We can make the amendment on the minutes and sign them there if that's the only issue.
Yeah. Okay. Any other issues? No. Happy, then I'll sign those later. Any issues with the action log? Councillor Fisher.
Thank you. Just one minor thing on 96. It says officers requested to review whether a new KCR is required. I think it was members who actually asked for that, not officers. I certainly asked for it. And I think one of the members opposite did as well. I don't think that should, I mean, officers are doing it, but I think that we should make it clear that requests for that action came from members, not officers.
I think it's just the way it's phrased. I think it means that officers were requested to review. I think it's just a grammatical.
Okay. Councillor Rose?
Yeah, I was going to say, I think it should be the word "were" that's missing there. But yeah, 84, 86, 93 and 94. It'd be good to get updates on all 4 of those. 84 and 86 because they've been there since this time last year. And I know it says it's kind of ongoing, but ongoing shouldn't be a year plus, and I think they are fixed term actions we should have seen in the papers. I couldn't spot them resolved in this paper. And then 93, 94, one is out of date and the other one doesn't have a date on it, but it'd be good to know what the current status of those 4 rows are.
Okay, well, perhaps if you could update us on the ones you're the owner for, and perhaps if the other people that are owners for the other ones could update us when they come to the table. I think we've got Mark and Lorraine with us.
I will endeavour to, Chair. I will be entirely honest that 84, whilst it's in my name, it's actually an action that Becky Eads will be picking up because I don't own the Fortis system. I don't know whether Debbie knows any more about this, but
it is still under review. The issue in the there is an issue balancing. I don't know, Excom, is that the section 106 system? Is that what that's called? Yeah, there is an issue balancing Excom to the financial system. We are aware of that. We had a meeting on it just this week, actually, within the finance team. So I'm aware work is ongoing. It is a lot of work. So it will take a long time.
And I think just to, I guess, clarify that point, we had a chat about Section 106 agreements and the fact that some of them weren't in there. And we asked if we could find out what proportion wasn't in there. Now, it will over time increase to 100%, but what that gap looks like, we've never been told, and it's been 12 months. So just knowing what percentage roughly is or isn't in there would be, the actual fixing takes a while. Thanks.
It'd probably be useful to update the status with what's been reported. Was he the 194 for Bryn?
Yeah, I will apologise to members that I haven't yet actioned that. It is something that is on my list that I need to do. As you will appreciate, there are many things on that list. But I will look to accelerate that particularly once we get past this meeting and things become a little quieter as we come closer to Christmas.
Should it be on our work plan?
Sorry?
Should it be on our work plan when we get to that bit of the agenda?
Yeah, we can certainly add it there.
Yeah, even just on the things to look at, scheduling at some point.
Okay, and I think there's, you say 86, which is Mark Outside, and 93, which is Lorraine. Yeah, okay, brilliant.
Would it be helpful if, as part of, because they're both here to present reports, they can address those as they do?
So that's what I meant. Yeah, we'll get to them when we get to them. Okay, any other issues maybe you'd like to raise with the action log? No.
No, just I guess what Debbie said across to Bryn is correct, which is that it is on March's work plan already. I hadn't spotted that, so I don't think that got picked up by the room. But let's make sure that my point was corrected there. We just put the end date on the on row 94 in line with that, if that's okay.
Okay. Move on then to public participation. We've got one public speaker this evening, Gwen Swinburne, to join us at the table.
Thank you, Chair. Before I speak, can I just ask everybody to please speak into their microphones? It is so hard to hear you, really it is. Thank you. Thank you, Chair. I wish to highlight serious and worsening governance and transparency failures and to propose corrective actions. We have fewer audit and governance meetings with less governance information, more businesses conducted behind closed doors and by opaque task and finish groups. Reports promised to this committee are not delivered. After the second public interest report, we were assured of regular NDA updates and payout schedules. When was this last report? Responses to some FOIs are increasingly perfunctory. The priority appears to be to keep the ICO at bay rather than answering openly. I don't feel the good enough responses are really good enough at all. As an example, following the concerning employment tribunal of the recently dismissed corporate director, I FOI'd all the director job descriptions and each Hay grade report. Both were entirely evaded, and an outcome that has regrettably become increasingly routine. Most would give up, but I will not. The pattern of evasion now appears to extend to procedural overreach. At the extraordinary full council meeting called to appoint our new chief executive, somehow registered public speakers were unilaterally banned, including myself. Having altered the public participation protocol overnight, after I had registered, the new version was published without any hint to highlight any changes. Members of all parties were stunned to see the assertion in the paper today regarding the statement the monitoring officer could not only change the constitution at will, but no need to even tell us or you for months. My follow-up questions on this outrageous overreach have predictably been met with deadly silence. Chair, I ask this committee urgently to review and rescind the extraordinary powers the monitoring officer asserts he has. In particular, require that any future amendment to public participation rules be subject to formal public consultation and officers be denied at-will changes. Secondly, stipulate that any self-delegated changes to the Constitution be permitted only in genuine emergencies and require a specific published officer decision record to include a full explanation and track changed report, and that report be then reported to this committee, i.e. we have an officer decision record for such an important change. Finally, I wrote to the section 151 and you today regarding multiple disturbing reports of masked, unidentified deflagging contractors working for the council. Can you please ensure that this is looked into quickly to make sure procurement and behaviours are according to our standards? Finally, Chair, can I please ask, are we going to get a second independent person, and what's happening about the community governance review? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. We'll address those issues as we move through the agenda. Okay. We move on then to item 6, which is the Information Governance Performance Report, and this is being presented to us by Lorraine. Lorraine Lunt, who's the Information Governance and Feedback Manager. Yeah, if you'd like to give us just a brief overview of the report, and then I'll ask if there are any questions.
Good evening. As you're aware, this is the briefing to members in respect of performance for Q1, April to June 2025, and Q2 covering July to September. As usual, we are asking members to note these performance details in the report and provide any comments or feedback, etc. going forward. Annex 1 presents the Information Governance Performance Scorecard for quarters 1 and 2, alongside the comparative data for the 3 previous years. As you will see, 1,190 requests were received in Q1 and Q2. These include the FOI, EIR and the subject access requests to records, and the other information requests such as those from police and insurance companies, etc. for investigative purposes. We have successfully sustained the improvements in the percentage of FOI and EIR responses within the statutory timescales, and noted that the ICO's target of 95% has been met for the combined FOI and EIR responses in both Q1 and 2. There has been a decrease in the percentage of in-time SAR responses received, completed in Q2 compared to Q1. This decline's most likely due to the increase in the complex requests, particularly those involving children's or adult social care records, care leavers and staff-related cases. We've also shown in the report to yourselves a snapshot of the FOI, EIR and SAR requests, just as a total in the responses in time. The information governance team, we continue to work closely with service areas and managers to maintain and enhance the performance. This includes the efforts to reduce the number of late responses and continue to ensure that there is, in inverted commas, good enough compliance. That's ensuring that we continue to meet the requirements set out in the ICO's enforcement notice a few years ago, and to regularly show that we can evidence that we've met their stretch target of 95% of in-time responses. I've also shown in Annex 2 the 4 ICO decision notices where the council responses under FOI or EIR were raised and escalated to the ICO, as is everybody's right to do if they're dissatisfied with the council's response and or the council's review response. As you can see, 3 of those were not upheld and 1 was partly upheld and not upheld. This means that the ICO agreed with the responses and the decisions and the exemptions relied on by the council in those cases. We have had to notify the ICO in this last reporting period of 2 personal data breaches that we are investigating, still 1, and waiting on further information from the ICO to take that forward. 1 has been closed by the ICO. There's no further action required by the council, as the actions and the evidence that we provided were satisfactory, and they had confirmed that they don't need us to take any further action. sorry, excuse me, data subjects and or individuals were kept fully informed in those processes, and also staff were supported where necessary through those investigations and cases. Following the successful transfer of complaints from my team, so as you may remember, we were called the corporate governance team. We are now the information governance team. More concerted effort will happen on providing you with more details in your reports to audit and governance, the FOI and EIR themes, which I hope helps answer one of the points on the action log. I believe it is reference number 73. No, reference action log number 74, sorry. I have asked for a separation out of the action point at number 74 because the covert surveillance one was completed and it's the themes that you're still waiting on. I'm also going to look to include information on the Council's performance and completion of data protection impact assessments, where we do with privacy notices and why, updates and information sharing that happens both internally and externally, more on records management and our adherence to the requirements on retaining records in a suitable way and for suitable periods, and transferring to the City Archives and or National Archives where it is appropriate for permanent preservation. Also, as the covert surveillance information required us to do, give you regular updates on covert surveillance and more information on CCTV in public spaces, council buildings, assets, body-worn cameras, etc. The other point, if it's possible, if I can update on action log point 93. My apologies to everybody. I have been working on it, but then it fell down in timescale due to having to look at what the Council's Milo e-learning module for data protection is. And because that's a third-party provision module, I have to do some additional work with our workforce development unit. So apologies that it hasn't been done in the expected timescale given, but I will get it out to you as soon as possible, with the aim of by the end of November. So the 30th of November, I will send through that update for the action log, if that's okay. And also to take the opportunity to explain that when we provide an FOI or an EIR response, all responses will have the ability to be challenged if you are dissatisfied with that response. An independent review is done internally of that, so not the people that do the response and the initial response. It's done by the IG team. We are not involved with collating in the information for the initial response. We are responsible for providing advice and support, but not the actual original response. But we will do the independent to service area review of a response and provide that response to the individual requester. And then everybody has the right, if they so wished, if they are still dissatisfied with the response, to escalate that and or take that through to the Information Commissioner's Office process. And as we've set out in Annex 2, the most recent cases that the ICO has been investigating under FOI and EIR, they found in favour of the Council's responses.
Okay, thank you very much. Are there any questions, comments from the committee? Councillor Merritt?
Can I ask about the approach to answering FOI questions in terms of sort of element of discretion that we have in terms of level of transparency and so on, and the comment that was made by the public speaker earlier. And I also wanted to question about accuracy of responses. I had one of my constituents raise with me FOI response that she had in terms of painting of council assets, and she had a response saying the council doesn't undertake painting. I was rather puzzled by it, and I actually went direct to the highways team, and they actually said they hadn't actually been asked about their policy behind that FOI, and did have a policy approach to that, and do paint where it's important for the protection of the asset. So there's two questions. Thanks.
So the FOI legislation is very clear on what a public authority must respond to under the FOI regime and statutory requirements, and that is to look at all information held in a recorded format, whichever type of recorded format that might be, digital, electronic, paper, notebooks, etc. And then when that information has been collated and looked at and retrieved, if it's not already published, the council has to look at what information can go into the public domain. That's because an FOI response, although it may be direct to the individual requester, is considered to be put into the public domain at large. So we have, as set out in the legislation, various exemptions that we can rely on, and that should be explained in the response, what information has been withheld or not disclosed and under which exemption. And alongside that, that fits in with the transparency requirements of the council to under the Local Government Transparency Code, etc. The council is also required to publish and have available the publication scheme, which we do, and again under the FOI regime, if there's any dissatisfaction with what the response has been, the individual has the right to request a review and or escalate to the ICO. There is also, following an internal audit report a few years ago, there is a quality assurance and monitoring done of the initial FOI and EI responses from a senior member in my team, and where we pick up that responses are not being completed in the required, I'll call it a template, it's not really a template, but there are certain things that both the legislation and the ICO demand must be in a response, i.e. the right to review, the right to escalate to the ICO, if the information is held, confirm or deny, etc. So that should be happening in all responses. Where it isn't, because they haven't either come through the information governance team's process, because as you may be aware, some FOIs may be sent into anybody in the council. It's up to the council to recognise it and handle and respond to it as an FOI or an EIR. The other bit under the FOI Act is that you can choose if you can provide the information requested in full and immediately, and within CYC we consider immediately probably within, well, up to the 5 working days. You can answer even if somebody mentions the FOI in their request. You can answer it under what's called business as usual, so just as a question and outside of the FOI regime. On that particular one that you mentioned, Councillor, I will take that away and look at that specific case and understand and look at what may have went wrong in that, i.e. did it come through the IG process, was it answered appropriately, and if not, why not, and then I can respond to you separately on that.
Okay, thank you. I think Councillor Rose.
Yeah, thank you. On the Action 93 in Milo, I do have access to the CYC mandatory data protection e-learning, but if there's updated learning and if all members can be reminded by email and linked to it, then that sounds good to me. Massive congratulations on the FOI and EIR numbers going from over 14% out of time to below 4% out of time, and SARS from 30% down to 10%. And ICOs from 25% out of time to 0%, all of which are great improvements. I'm slightly concerned a couple of years ago when we were talking that these were roughly where I thought we should be, and I'm glad that we are now there. The ICO decisions all seem pretty sensible, but within the content and what was said, I'm slightly concerned we don't have any ability to find out how long our vacancies have been empty for. I'm also slightly concerned we took 4 months and the commissioner escalation to reply to something that should have been done in 2 months, especially if our response is we can't do it. So it'd be good to have some assurance that those are not repeatable things. And then on the 2 data breaches you mentioned and that are in the report, what's the sort of scale? Is it one person's data or an email that's copying the wrong person or something, or is it a larger data set, or are we allowed to know that?
in respect of the notified to the ICO breaches, because of the nature of the breach of the information, it may identify the individuals involved. However, what I can say is both were human error, and all the appropriate actions and steps put into place to reduce that risk of happening again have been taken. And as I say, the ICO on one has already confirmed that there's no further action that they would need us to take in respect of that. And on the other one, we are awaiting their outcome. So I will provide an update in my next report.
Okay, any further questions? Can't see any, so go.
Sorry, I just remembered I hadn't answered the other bit about the vacancies and not repeatable, etc. I would have to take that comment away to the service areas involved.
Okay.
Is that okay?
Thank you. Okay, we could move on then. Thank you. Go on then to item 7, which is the revised public participation protocol. I think this is Bryn. Just let Councillor Coles get settled.
Yeah, so thank you, Chair. I hope full members that the report itself is fairly self-explanatory, so I'm just happy to take any questions.
Okay. Thank you. Any questions or issues anybody would like to raise? See, Councillor Rose.
Yeah, I guess echoing the point around the fact that we haven't got a track changes document, it'd be good to always ensure that we've got that so that we can see specifically what's been changed. The change that gives me some concern is in Annex 1, paragraph 16, there will be no public participation rights in respect of extraordinary council meetings dealing with staffing matters, and requests to speak at such meetings will be declined. And my concern specifically is that they could be commenting on any other part of that decision or the process, or in this instance, the difference between the chief executive title versus the role that exists, or timelines or costs, or saying positive things about the York's massive campaign of information they did related to the role, rather than specifically personal things about that individual. I do agree that the risk is much higher. A meeting is dedicated effectively to one person, but I feel like there are other things that could be raised in public participation that would be appropriate, and it just feels like that's a bit of an overly heavy blanket for that scenario.
So the reality is that what you're talking about is a meeting which is part of an employment relationship between an individual and the council as a body corporate. And there is a process defined for that recruitment, which does not include public commentary. Now, I appreciate what you're saying is there may be questions about process. Those questions should be addressed to the Staffing Matters and Urgency Committee, which makes the decision to go out in the first place, to go for a chief executive, to go for the process that it then sets out, because that's matters of principle rather than of individual contracts. So here you're talking about an individual. In this case, it's an employment process, so we are employing an individual. But equally, chief officers, as part of their terms and conditions, have a right to request a hearing at full council if they are being disciplined or made redundant. So what you then have is the other end of that employment process, where you have a very personal process that's going on, and it is wholly inappropriate to have public comments on that sort of process. So you wouldn't expect to turn up for a job interview and go through the process, and then the employer say, well, we're actually also going to open up this interview process to third parties. So the whole point about this is maintaining the integrity of the employment process for the council.
I do understand the point that you've made. I guess I'm not sure that I see it that way. And in the past, everything has been in these public meetings. I think if I went for a job interview and they said, by the way, this job interview is being webcast and anyone can attend, and I think that's a different scenario as well. So it seems strange to me that we would have a public meeting where public can be present, and they can't participate even in some of the things that aren't related to that person. I know what you're saying about it being an HR process, but I don't know if I consider that bit of it to be part of the HR process.
The converse, if I can, is that there is no statutory right for the public to participate in any way other than through observation. The statutory right is for people to observe and, if they choose, to report. Beyond that, the council then chooses what other rights it grants people.
I agree.
I appreciate. I'm sorry, Chair. We're getting into something of a debate.
Yeah, I keep glancing over in case the chair wants me to shut up. But I agree that we don't have statutory rights, but not everything in the Constitution is statutory minimum, right? And we should be aspiring to more participation where it's appropriate. And I think we generally have the spirit here of public can participate in anything unless we feel that it's not appropriate. And obviously, public participation protocol specifically is if it's about an individual person, then it wouldn't be appropriate. The fact that this has previously been allowed and it was never a concern, we didn't fix it straight off the back of it happening previously, where we went, oh, actually, that shouldn't have really been possible. It surprises me that, and the way that in which it was done, where it was done very, very quickly and without coming through this committee, etc., is an unusual set of circumstances as well. And it feels to me like something that needs broader consideration rather than us tick boxing going, yep, it's fine to make that change.
Councillor Merritt.
So I'm also concerned that the way that this has happened so quickly on quite a significant issue. The arrangement that we've set up in terms of the combined authorities, if there is an urgent decision which has to go to on the Constitution, which has to go to the full authority, if there isn't time to take it to an A&G committee, then the chair and the vice chair at least are consulted. Is there a similar arrangement here where the chair and the vice chair are consulted on this change?
No, I'll answer that quite cleanly. No, this is a direct delegation to an officer. So there is no requirement for me to consult anyone. As you'll see from the terms of the participation protocol in paragraph 1, it is a reporting to the committee ex post facto. Sorry to drift into Latin. What I will say, I looked back at my notes earlier. So I first spoke to the leader about this on the 8th of October. I then spoke to Councillor Stewart on the 15th of October, Councillor Healy on the 20th, and then the leader again on the 20th, before the change was made. So a representative from the 3 key parties were each spoken to about the change before it was made.
Okay, Councillor Fisher.
Thank you. This doesn't refer to the actual changes, but to the actual protocol itself. It says that the demolishing officer, the head of democratic governance, will review the protocol every 6 months to ensure it remains fit for purpose. There's one aspect of it I really don't think is fit for purpose, which is the rights of ward councillors to speak on issues. We have the limitation, which is in 14 of 10 speakers are 3 minutes each. And then it says, City of York Council who wish to speak at a meeting in which they're not a member may participate in meetings in any of the ways described in these rules. There was a case a couple of years ago when I was out of the area, had no phone signal when the agenda was published. When I got home and tried to register, 10 people had all registered, 10 members of the public had registered to speak on a traffic regulations order, and I wasn't able to speak on a really important item in my ward. I think we do need to say that any ward member should have the right to speak at any meeting on any matter that actually affects their ward. And I'm sorry, but I think not having that right simply means that we're not able to do the job we're elected to do, which is to represent our electors. And I think, there has to be some common sense about this. That I'm very all in favour of members of the public, but when you get 10 people all coming to speak on one issue, and that shuts everybody else out, it was controversial, but I think we need to amend that and look at it.
Happy to take that away, Chair.
That's a cost.
Just a hopefully constructive suggestion that perhaps it could be at the discretion of whichever committee it is to allow ward additional people to participate in public participation. I can't imagine a scenario where a scrutiny committee or a planning or licensing committee wouldn't want to hear from people whose wards are affected if for whatever reason they weren't able to have met the 10 slots that were available. It's quite unusual to have all 10 slots taken anyway. So therefore, I would assume that you would want to then appeal just to that particular committee. Whether that makes it any easier, I don't know.
If it's of assistance, the chair of the committee will always retain that right. That ultimately it is their meeting and therefore they are able to exercise discretion and say, well, we'll allow 11th speaker. It's slightly strange because you're using your position as a councillor to gain that advantage, but then you are a councillor, and there should be a degree of additional cognizance given to that. It might also be worth remembering that as part of the changes to the council procedure rules, one of the changes we made to the overall operation of the public participation protocol was to prevent registration for speaking prior to the publication of the agenda. Now, in this case, the registration that certainly was attempted was in breach of that and therefore wouldn't have been accepted irrespective, because the agenda hadn't gone out for that meeting.
Yeah, I think I'd say
that's perhaps a side issue, but it would hopefully help to alleviate some of the issue that Councillor Fisher had, because if people can register that far ahead, then suddenly you lose all of those spots. Whereas if people have to do it once it's published, it makes it easier for.
Yeah, I mean, would that were so, I suppose, because when we tried as the 3 ward councillors for Haxby to register for planning, we were only allowed 1 spot between us. So I do think there's a bit of a kind of grey area where councillors, and that's because ultimately people don't want to set precedent. So although there is a discretion, people are aware that that discretion very quickly becomes the rule once you've done it once. So I think things like that needs to be codified a bit. So I think it would be useful for that sort of going. I guess in terms of the substantive issue, I guess I've got 2 or 3 issues. I suppose the decision itself, and I think as I'd always understood it, the changes the monitoring officer could make were more about tidying up, moving things in line with the law, addressing matters of urgency. And this feels a bit more to me like a sort of matter of policy, and a sort of decision about which should probably be more in the kind of political arena being decided by councillors. So I sort of feel that's the sort of, and we can disagree about that, and obviously everybody's making decisions in good faith, but I think to me it just feels like a decision which is a bit more on the erring on the kind of policy side of things than necessarily just kind of the tidying up the legal points. But I appreciate the words are what they are. So I guess there's a question for the committee in terms of how we would address that side of things. I think there's a concern as well in terms of how the decision was made and whether it was made. And I think perhaps this kind of highlights some holes in the system, where it would probably be, we as a committee would consider ourselves, I guess, guardians of the council's constitution. And so we really should be, I guess, at the very least, looped into decisions like that very quickly. And I think the risk with these sorts of amendments is, as happened here, was the first I heard about it was when a public member of the public contacted me and said, "Did you know this had happened?" And obviously I didn't. So I think it sort of suggests there's perhaps a little gap that just needs tidying up in terms of the way the issue is kind of, once the change has been made, fair enough, but it probably needs, as was suggested, a decision notice which is forward to the chair and the vice chair, or to the committee, or to come to the chair, vice chair before the decision and to say, this is what I'm thinking of doing, any issues, and even if you can still make the decision. But I think it's possibly just, I appreciate most changes of a small scale, but I think in this case it probably would have been useful, and this just kind of highlights perhaps a little gap in the sort of systems we've got at the moment that we could plug. So I suggest maybe those 2 things are just given some thought, and I don't know what the best way of doing that is, whether that's a sort of constitution working group thing again, or whether it's
So I suppose on the first point, I have a general power under the scheme of delegation, which allows me to make those tinkering changes of job titles and legislation changes and all the rest. This then sits above that as a separate power granted by the annex itself. But I am absolutely happy to take on board what's been said. And if we're going to look at the public participation protocol separately, then we'll loop all of this in together and perhaps look at a process for how that would work.
Okay. Councillor Marriott?
Welcome what Bryn's saying, but I'd prefer something a little bit more definitive in the same way as you're taking the other issue that Tony's raised. I'd like to see both those sets of issues addressed and turned round, hopefully by perhaps the next time we meet.
Happy to look at arranging another constitution working group meeting. I appreciate Councillor Rose may develop a nervous tick as a result, but yeah, we happy to do that, and so we'll look to bring something back next time round.
Okay, Councillor Rose?
Yeah, I mean, I liked the Constitution Working Group. I think it's it was wordy and frequent and didn't achieve the outcomes we wanted. And I understand why we moved away from that way of working, but I think the way we've got instead is hope that Bryn does a good job, and sometimes we'll see some stuff at ANG, which I don't think gives me as much assurance as I'd like. Yeah, I think on the specific one, again, the powers are there so that we can do it in a more streamlined way. That Bryn can make those small changes and they come to ANG for note for ratification. But ANG has to have the ability to control those changes. If there's something that we think is not appropriate for whatever reason, we should be able to discuss that. And I think in an emergency situation such as this, if we're saying it had to be done on that time frame, and obviously it made sense for it to be done ahead of that specific meeting, I think it should be ANG chair and vice chair that are the people saying it's okay or not, because it's what ANG is there for, rather than anybody else from the parties. But again, I don't think there's any particular problem with it having been scouted across the different groups for note. I do think tracking, without tracking, I mean, I'm looking through going, I think those are the changes, and I have to then, to be sure, I'd have to pull up the thing and check every paragraph. So I think that is important. Everything else is as it has been. Come to ANG, we can have that discussion. It's probably uncontroversial, and I mean the other half of it, which is people can only speak on the item on the agenda for an extraordinary council. 100% agree. That definitely should be the rule. There are regular meetings for a reason. If you want to bring something to council's general note, that's what they're for. It should only be on that topic. So, I 100% back that one. But I do think this other change around public participation of this particular type of meeting, which we're not going to see for a while, hopefully, I think probably does need to be considered as just rather than noting it. I think there should be an ANG action just to say, can we have a bit more of a chat about it? And maybe it's a working group, maybe it's not, but I'm happy to defer to chair and VC for what's best.
Yeah, and I think having made the changes to the protocol, I think we were always aware that there would be kind of bedding in issues that would come up as we went along. I think it's always going to be the case that we're going to have to go, well, that didn't quite work the way we expected it would. So I don't think it's necessarily a surprise thing. Councillor Burton?
I suppose just my 2 pence worth on, I think that I agree. I think you having explained why you made the decision, the person that had registered before the agenda was put out, it makes sense, but it would have been really good to have known about it. I think for at least for Councillor Hollier and myself, chair and vice chair, or maybe even the whole committee. And I agree with, looking again at the public participation to ensure that councillors do perhaps have that right. I don't know, it might be contentious, but at least we could debate it. And I think that's, the democratic side of what we're doing is important. I think that came out during our working group discussions as well, that we were keen to keep as much public participation as possible, because we're very much for that. But this situation where people were booking way in advance. I've just been listening about driving tests, a bit like that. That was out of hand, and I think it's a good thing it's been curbed back, so things are more pertinent to the topics that we're discussing on the day. So there's something else I wanted to say, but it's gone. But yeah, generally I agree with my colleagues there. but thank you for the explanation too. But that would have been good to know beforehand, I suppose.
Okay, are we happy with Councillor Rose?
Yeah, just one tiny point around the kind of tangential thing that you mentioned around eligibility ahead of the time frame of registering, which obviously makes sense because we want to make sure it's a fair process. Just wanted to make sure that we're all clear that that means they should be told that they have to re-register within that time frame, rather than they just don't find out that they're not speaking until the day or anything, especially if there's only potentially one speaker. So
If we were,
I think we're all happy with that. I just wanted to.
So in general terms, if we were refusing a registration because somebody had tried to register too early, they would be told, I'm sorry, you have to come back after the agenda's published.
Okay. Okay, we're happy to move on then to agenda item 8, which is the Treasury Management 25-26 mid-year report and review. It's Debbie.
Thank you. So this is your regular mid-year update, sets out the usual economic update and an interest rate forecast. So obviously we've got a budget coming up, so place your bets now as to whether we've got that right or wrong. In terms of borrowing, the report outlines that we've taken out one new loan in the period so far this year, but we've also 2 loans have matured. So, and also we've set out in paragraph 42, the only thing that is worth pointing out is we had one remaining LOBO loan, which there were loans that were controversial in the past. We had one left, and we've repaid that loan because the lender did come and exercise their option to increase the interest rate, which was always a risk with these loans. And so we've repaid the loan, and that's why we replaced it with PWLB borrowing, which was more cost effective. So we haven't got any LOBO loans left now. We continue to closely monitor borrowing rates and our debt position. I think I mentioned to you before, our sort of biggest area of risk actually is that we've been undertaking borrowing for sort of 12 months. And so we have a significant chunk of debt to refinance at certain points of the year. So we've been keeping an eye on rates too. We're going to start spreading that out over a longer time period now so that we don't have that risk in one place. But they were the only things to draw to your attention, Chair.
Thank you. Any issues to raise, questions, comments? Councillor Coles?
Just a question really, on the other end of things, other than the debt end. The money that presumably is invested, just what the ability of your team is to manage that to the best advantage of the council, given that I'm sure your resources are as stretched as everywhere else in the council. So just really, do you feel like you've got enough capacity to move everything that we've got invested to the place where it will optimise the return for council taxpayers?
Yeah, we don't have a lot of investment because we keep our cash quite short to minimise our borrowing costs, and we use money market funds. So it's kind of all done online, and the Treasury management policy sets out the criteria that we use for investment, set out in order of importance, is security, liquidity, yield. So the security being the most important one, the liquidity, so make sure we get it back, make sure we can have it back when we want it, and then the yield thirdly. We also have a 4th criteria, which we introduced some years ago around ESG, and I've suddenly forgotten ethical, thank you, ethical social governance, I think, isn't it? Anyway, where all things being equal, if we had 2 investments that were of equal, of the first 3, we would go for the one that was scored higher on an ethical kind of investment approach. So yes, I think we do have the capacity that we need.
Okay. Councillor Rose?
No, I've got nothing. The only thing I was going to say was the chart with the colours on it on paragraph 27. Still hard to see, particularly in grayscale. We talked before about having like X markers or circles for different rows, but I decided not to say that. But since I've been called anyway, I might as well say it.
Okay. Councillor Merritt, have you? No. Okay. All right. We're happy then to move on to agenda item 9, which is the audit progress report. I think we're being joined by Mark Outside and Louise Stables from Mazars.
Thanks, Chair. Don't think this should take too long, to be honest. Take the report as read and just highlight the key points for you this evening. We've issued our certificate for 23-24, which closes that audit with nothing else to report, and that was because we needed some additional guidance from the National Audit Office, so we closed down the WGA, and we also closed down our objection that we received in regard to that year. For 24-25, the audit is currently underway. We've not changed our risk assessment. The significant risks that we highlighted in our audit plan remain the same, and we've not identified any new risks. I'll hand you over to Louise, who'll be able to give you a bit of an update in terms of where we're at with the audit, and we can take any questions at the end. Thank you.
Thanks, Mark. So just to give you an update on the 24-25 audit, the planning and risk assessment part of the audit is largely complete. We've got a small number of outstanding matters and we're following those up with officers. They're working with us to resolve those. We've now commenced the field work stage of the audit, and that is ongoing. We started that at the beginning of October, so we're well into the field work. We're focusing on the key areas of sample testing, significant and enhanced risks initially. So focusing on those larger areas and more risky areas of the audit. The audit's progressing well. We've got the full support of officers and we're on track to deliver the opinion by the February backstop deadline. We'll bring our audit completion report to the January Audit and Governance Committee ahead of that backstop deadline. Our value for money arrangements work is largely complete. We've got a small number of outstanding areas, but they are minimal. And we intend to issue our draft auditor's annual report, which includes our commentary on the council's value for money arrangements by the 30th of November. That deadline is slightly ahead of the backstop deadline.
Okay, any questions or issues? Not see any, so John, Castle Rose. John?
It's not on your report actually, it's on our work plan where we refer to as Mazars, and I just wanted to check if you don't care because Mazars is kind of an name for Forvis Mazars, or the fact that you've changed to Forvis Mazars is something we should make sure we always reference. Not a big one, but you know.
I'll leave that to you.
Councillor Merritt.
Yes, it was just in terms of the ancillary information about all the publication and other document updates, which I assume are predominantly technical, but are there any things that are likely to have an impact that we ought to be aware of?
There's the update from on the backstop, which is probably quite useful.
Right. Thanks.
Okay. Councillor Coles.
Actually, a question for Debbie, if that's all right, whether or not it's useful to you, and whether you are getting out of it what you think you need in terms of identifying risks or challenges that we ought to be looking at.
Yeah, definitely. It's a useful summary for us, and the team liaise regularly with Mark and Louise quite frequently at the minute as we're doing the accounts audit, maybe less frequently other parts of the year, but we also with Mark and Louise have I think we've done it 6 monthly, haven't we, Mark, a catch up with myself and the Chief Operating Officer, so that we're discussing those kind of organisational issues, and so we're highlighting there. Mark will bring any issues there to us as well that he thinks we need to be aware of, so yes, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. We'll move on then to item 10, which is the counter fraud progress report, which is Max Thomas, Conor Munro and Jonathan Dodsworth.
Good evening. This is the counter fraud update report, and it talks, and just to highlight a few bits from the report, it includes a good piece of work, I think, around parking related frauds that were targeting visitors and residents in York. I was pleased with the work of the team for that. We've also conducted an internal campaign around cybersecurity for employees. The report details results of our investigative work, and I'm really pleased that we're on track to meet our savings target. We've helped identify £176,000 in savings to date. Annex A gives a bit more information about the breakdown of those savings, the caseload, and individual areas of counter fraud work. But that's all I'll say about it. But happy to take any questions.
Okay, are there any questions? Councillor Coles?
Thanks. I just noticed that this report, sorry, I can't put this down without touching my keyboard. This report doesn't have a section in it that the introduction to the report rather than the report itself, apologies, doesn't include organisational impact and implications, which actually feels quite significant in a fraud report in terms of equality impact and those kind of issues that I know most of the papers that we get do cover. I just wondered whether there was any reason why it wasn't covered when it actually feels like it's probably quite significant in the area of fraud. That there probably is quite significant organisational risk and implication from the report itself, but it isn't in the covering paper.
I think that's well pointed out, Councillor, and I suspect that's an oversight more than anything else, and we're happy to include it in future.
Thank you. And I suppose, given that it is quite an important implication around fraud in terms of equalities and making sure that we aren't pursuing people unfairly across the city, or and the other, I can't remember what all the criteria are that are covered. Would it be possible for that to be shared with the committee retrospectively about this report, just because so that we properly understand that that's been thought about in terms of how we're presented with the information?
Yeah, absolutely.
Councillor Rose?
Yeah, I mean, great news on the numbers, and usually I've got some questions to follow up on the pie charts, and I don't this time around. But my questions are around the QR code text fraud stuff. I think all of us have seen examples of across the city, and this is an area of concern. And I couldn't quite see in the report what the kind of outcomes have been from that in terms of tracking down perpetrators, stopping it from happening in the future. The kind of how much has it been prevented? I know that we've been getting in touch with people who we think are impacted by it, but on the flip side of that, what are we doing to actually combat that fraud going forward?
Yeah, absolutely. I think we're dealing with organised criminals. We think they're operating nationally. We have looked into a number of avenues of investigation to try and identify the people behind it. My suspicion is the people who are behind it have never been to York. Rather, they franchise out the operation of putting up the stickers to fool residents and visitors. Unfortunately, I think I wouldn't be being honest with you if I said that I think that we have a good chance of arresting these people and getting justice. I think the best outcome that we could achieve is raising awareness of it and ensuring that when these things are put up, that they're taken down as quickly as possible.
Do you have an idea of sort of how many people were sort of tricked by it, and I guess how long the sticker stayed up? Because I guess we've got parking wardens going round, I don't know, once or twice a day. Presumably, is it part of their sort of doing the rounds just to sort of check? Because in reality, I suppose there really shouldn't be stickers up for more than, at most a day, I guess.
Yeah, there were a couple of periods of time when the stickers were going up, and so that was from January into the summer. So sporadic. We've worked with the parking department to make sure that where the stickers were put up, that they were identified quickly and taken down very quickly as well. I would like to say that the stickers would not be up for more than one day. One of our officers lived next to one of the car parks in York, and he was going every day to look at them to try and identify when they were going up. We suspect they were going up in the evenings, and they were taken down as soon as possible after that. it depends on the rota of the parking officers. In terms of the number of people affected, I think we're looking at maybe a dozen people have been reported to ourselves, which is not a huge number of people, but it's a horrible thing to happen to somebody who's simply trying to park in a council car park.
Do we have a kind of duty of care to those people, or is it sort of tough luck?
I don't think the council has taken any financial liability for the fraud. However, we do have a duty of care for people, and I think that we've tried to show that by giving them good advice and listening to their concerns.
Okay, that's Coles.
Just with permission and with reference to my register of interests for my substantive role as the Deputy Mayor for Police, Fire and Crime, this was something that the York Bid Safe York partnership were looking at very closely in the summer. And my understanding was that things were going up repeatedly, but it was actually very difficult for anyone monitoring it to track it, because even with CCTV, there were so many people going to and from the places where you pay, the meters where you pay, that it was virtually impossible to work out who might have put them up. But it was something that was looked at really carefully in the summer. And I think it's one of those issues that felt like once that little window gets closed, there'll be something else that will come down the tracks, because the business model just evolves, and the criminal underworld just evolves into something else. This was really unfortunate, and York was particularly targeted, I think. But I do think the council partnership with York Bid and other partners were quite fast at trying to ensure that people were being made aware of it, and that all the parking wardens were aware quickly. And that they were trying to get communications out to the public about the risks and people to be careful. But it was certainly a problem. Can I just ask whether it's something that you think is still going on, or whether you think it's gone away?
I'd be surprised if it's gone away completely. And I think the advice that we'd give everybody is to be very cautious of anything using a QR code in a public setting. It's not just car parks. It could be a lot of different types of things. So yeah, I wouldn't be surprised, but I think you're absolutely right that the business model changes, so it evolves, and it will get better.
Thank you, Councillor Rose.
Yeah, just one specific point, I guess. The council will never ask people to give money via QR code, so presumably we can communicate to people that if they see a QR code that purports to be the council, they could scrawl on it in a biro or something in the meantime while they report it, or if we are allowing residents to rip one off and get rid of the stickers. I don't know if that's better or if it's worse than having somebody go and check it and capturing that data from it, but it feels to me like there's more we probably could have communicated about under no circumstances ever. And if you see one, don't just not be fooled by it, but you can take action in some way. So something for us to consider.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Merritt.
Yes, on paragraph 11, you've made reference to 10 people receiving formal warnings. Was that on parking infringements, or more generally on the variety of issues? First question.
That would be over a variety of issues.
Right. Okay. What's the basis of choice about when you take things further, or you just do this?
We have a process, and it considers the circumstances of a case. Every case is different. The circumstances of the person who's committed a fraud or made a mistake, which is something that we see a lot of. We look at the level of evidence that we have in a case. We look at what's the outcome for the council that it's trying to achieve. We're not here to administer justice in the sense of like the CPS might want to do so. Our role is to really create a deterrent and a warning. And if taking a case further is not going to achieve those aims, then I think it undermines the rationale for taking that kind of strong action. But that being said, we're not afraid to take strong action where it is due and when it is due.
Okay, thank you, and thanks in terms of the general report for all you're doing. It's very pleasing to see the positive results here.
Okay. I can't see any further questions, so thank you very much. I mean, feel free to, because I think you're on the next but one item as well, if you want to hang on, or perhaps not. Okay, move on then to item 11, which is the work plan. I've lost. Where is it? 91. Right. Any questions, issues? No. That's all those.
No, just I guess for completeness, we mentioned the point that was then redacted in the action log, so nothing is changing for that. And then Forvis Mazars is technically their name, but it doesn't actually matter.
Thank you. I think whilst we're here, it might be worth just picking up a couple of the issues that got raised in public participation. So we're getting an update on the recruitment of the independent member in January. Is it worth just very quick?
What I might do, Chair, if I can, is invite Julie Gallagher to the table. Julie is our Head of Democratic Services. She can probably give you a much more up-to-date update than I can.
Sorry.
So we need to recruit an independent person for this particular committee and also an independent person for the standards committee and also the independent panel members for the independent remuneration panel. So what we've done is we've reviewed all the job descriptions, person specs, and we're now ready to go to advert. It's ready to go live now, but we just wanted to bring it to this committee today just to say, you know, it's all still okay. Do you want us to wait till after Christmas? Are you concerned that if we go this side of Christmas that we might lose some of our candidates, or wait till January?
Okay. Are there any questions?
I'll just say, obviously, it would be better the sooner we can get somebody on this committee, but we'll take officer guidance as to when the most effective time to actually get some applicants is given that, you know, Christmas might not be.
There is the best part of 3 months to the next meeting, so maybe a opportune gap. So.
Yeah, I mean, we're happy to run the exercise now and see what happens. And if we don't get anything suitable, we can do it again after Christmas. If members are comfortable with that as an approach, then, you know, that allows us to crack on now, see what comes back, and see where we go.
Okay.
I'm happy with that. Just, I guess, to add is when I was job hunting over Christmas, and there weren't that many roles available. So you did get more traction if you had an active job over that week, because you got time to kill and nobody's putting new jobs up. So actually, if you've got an extended period where it's online, there's no harm. Yeah, they won't hit back as quickly as they would otherwise. But if we don't get anything before Christmas, leave it over Christmas into New Year rather than starting again in the year. It's my advice.
I'll absolutely take that on board.
That's pertinent.
Just seems sensible to run it now. If you don't get anything, run it again. Yeah, sooner the better, really, isn't it? Because it's been going on quite a while now.
Okay, I think that's a fairly clear view. Just a second before you go. So the other one was the community governance review, and I think we resolved sometime earlier this year to sort of try and kickstart that process because we've not had one in a very long time. And then the boundary commission sort of boundary changes process started. So I think what we decided was that it would go.
I think what the committee decided was to request a report on the process, but the committee itself cannot resolve to start a CGR because that is a full council decision. or it is a decision of the electorate of York through a relevant petition. So we obviously the issue has been kicking around the council for a while. Thus far, we've not had any indication that it is something that council wants to pursue at this time. And obviously, the other challenge you've got is we're in the midst of the Local Government Boundary Commission review. So we realistically, we wouldn't look to do anything until after that had concluded, because you're looking at changing areas and reparishing areas at the same time as looking at how the council itself runs.
Yeah, I think it makes sense to wait for the boundary review to conclude, I think. And then obviously as soon as the boundary review concludes, there's less than 6 months to the next elections. So it probably is a kind of, you know, post 27 elections action. But I think we do just need it as a sort of semi-standing thought in the mind, just so that when we do get past those elections, it does kick off. Go on, Councillor Rose.
Yeah, when we were talking about it previously, it was something that was an urgent fix required, and I'm sure you're already caught up on York's oddities, particularly around boundaries. But some of our parish boundaries are so old that they are ludicrous. And I always point people to the A64 junction next to Askham bar Tesco. If you want to have a fun little look at some boundaries around there, it doesn't impact anybody's houses, but it just shows the kind of nonsense that we haven't fixed over the years. And you know, back in the spring, there was still time, I thought, to correct some of those things, like alignment with a major road where there have been houses built that are kind of just, you know, a house is split in half by boundaries, stuff like that. That time has gone. We're now in the middle of the LGBC, and there's literally, you know, in a week's time, we know how many numbers there are, and then we go into the boundaries. So it physically can't be done at this point. There is a process at the end of the LGBCE recommendations, not recommendations, but decision, where it can then auto trigger or makes the recommendation we need that CGR anyway. And certainly given that some of the houses are in multiple areas, they could be split across wards in weird ways, or that it just doesn't quite make sense. It 100% makes sense to do it as soon as possible afterwards. But I agree that with less than 6 months then, or however long it actually is, before the election is not the right time to do it, especially if there's probably co-term parish council elections on the same day in some places. So yeah, I think it should be on our action log for A&G with a date of May 2027 on it, and just sit there doing nothing every meeting. But yeah, as soon as the locals are out of the way, I think we should press on with fixing some of the issues, like people who clearly live in Acomb, but their house is for some reason in a different parish because of someone who owned a field 100 years ago. Yeah, the sooner the better. But yeah.
Just as a follow-on, I'm sure members are already aware, but the Boundary Commission are due to meet on Tuesday, the 18th of November, to sort of decide the numbers, and the consultation is still proposed to start on the 25th of November. So we're still working to that timeline.
Thank you. Thank you. And then perhaps just one for Debbie as well, just on the NDAs issue. I know we had a discussion about the reporting of them or not, and it's probably worth just putting it on the record, and then it's on the record.
Yeah, we did have a conversation. We've reflected, and what I'll do is, as part of the annual accounts report, I'll make sure it's covered in there. That we haven't had any. That's why we haven't done a report. But I accept that what we agreed to do was bring you a report telling you that we hadn't had any. So what I will do is we'll review that, and when we bring to the annual accounts report, we'll include it. If needed, we do a separate report, or we'll bring it alongside that. So there's an annual check at this committee over any activity in that area.
Councillor Rose?
Yeah, I just, because we're talking about things that were mentioned in public participation, the only other thing that was mentioned was the fact that we're not meeting as often, but there are more task and finish groups, and the governance of those isn't as clear. And I kind of have forgotten what we were saying in terms of monitoring of task and finish groups and how they operate, but maybe that should be an action or a future work plan item in due course for us to have that chat about how we make sure that task and finish groups are doing what we always hoped they would. It's also kind of corporate scrutiny, so wherever that sits, but I appreciate that wasn't addressed in this meeting.
I think all I can say, Councillor, is that I'm not aware that this committee is meeting less than it used to. And likewise, the arrangements for scrutiny are obviously something that were debated by council and agreed by council. So, you know, some of that is also a function of reduced officer capacity leading to reduced formal meetings, which allow officers to prepare more for the formal meetings. So some of it is about that balancing act that we all have to do.
I think there was an intent, wasn't it, to review the new scrutiny arrangements after a year? So I guess that's part of that. Okay, so no further points on the work plan. We've no urgent business, so I think the only item left is the exempt part of the meeting, but I guess there is the front part to that, which we can discuss in public. But I guess just be careful not to stray into the pink papers. That's nothing. Thanking SVR, I'll now be being joined by Max Thomas and Conor Munro. So thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So Conor Munro, Assistant Director, Audit Assurance. So we're presenting the committee with its regular progress report, which captures work that we've completed, work that's currently underway, and work that's planned over the remainder of the year. It also discusses the outcome of internal audit follow-up work on agreed actions that have been arisen from previous audits. I think there's not too much to point out, particularly in this report. Hopefully it's fairly self-explanatory and all familiar to you by now. I think you'll also see that obviously since the last report to the committee, there's been quite a lot of churn in terms of we've finalised 8 audit reports, 5 are in draft. There were 17 in progress and 7 in earlier stages of planning to commence during the current quarter. So quite a significant body of work underway to help us form our annual opinion when it comes to that time around May, June time next year. Obviously, the reports themselves are included as exempt annexes to the report, and we can discuss those in detail in private session. With regards to follow-up, I would just say overall the position is healthy as a report. It speaks to in relation to the overall volume of follow-ups that are in the system, so actions that we've been following up this year. Only 7 are overdue. Yes, ideally that number would be 0, but it is close to 0 at the moment. Just for the committee's information, they arise from 5 separate audits, and that we're currently following those up through the follow-up and escalation procedure. So there aren't really, while we are reporting them to yourselves as overdue, we are not requesting the committee to support us in closing those down. We're still exploring avenues through the procedure currently. So just wanted to point that out, even though they are reported and they are in hand, as it were. So I think beyond just mentioning that we are obviously underway with a lot of pieces of work at the moment in time, I think it's mainly just for any if the committee has any questions on work ongoing or work planned in the next quarter, in the final quarter of the year.
Just to remind members, stick to the white pages. Councillor.
Yes. When we discussed this year's internal audit work programme, I raised the issue of the Section 106 timeliness of use of the Section 106 receipts. And my recollection at the time was I was given the impression that that was going to be a relatively simple thing to pick up. I'm a little disturbed that it appears at the bottom now of the do next rather than being programmed. We have an issue now because with the last council we had a motion which has specifically required a working group to be set up to try and deal with some of the Section 106 issues. So actually getting this done and the report will be quite an important piece of evidence that working group would benefit from. So I'd like to push quite hard that there is some reprioritisation to pick up this outstanding piece of work.
Thank you, Councillor Merritt. Yeah, we can certainly take that on board. I think up to now it's been a case of when do we time the work? Do we time it, once, that opportunity has been had, to have those discussions, and then are we seeing any sort of improvement as a result of those, or do we go in advance of that? But we can certainly take your views forward on that and have a conversation with officers about prioritisation for the next quarter.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Any further questions, Councillor Fisher?
Thank you. It's a matter relating to one of the opinions you've given, which is also quoted in the action log on page 23, which is about the Salvation Army contract and the contract management provision. On page 23, it says the internal audit report has been issued with a limited assurance opinion. Yet here it says reasonable assurance. Now, to me, limited assurance worries me, whereas reasonable assurance doesn't worry me quite as much. Which is correct, please?
Yeah, it's reasonable.
It's reasonable.
Yes, I'm not quite sure why it's appearing as limited in the action log, but yeah, it's reasonable.
Okay, thank you. Just wanted to clarify that there wasn't some discontinuity.
Yeah, no problem.
Okay. Any further issues at this point? No. If not, as mentioned, Councillor Rose looks pained. Okay. Okay, so as mentioned before, there's no urgent business, so we'll close the public meeting there and move into private session. Okay. Okay. Do people want 5-minute